Hi, everybody. Welcome to OK Everyday, a podcast about transactional analysis where Jason and myself dive into how to make our lives okay every day. Hey, Jason.
Hey, hey, Ollie.
And today we're talking about
The adult ego state.
the adult ego state. Now, it is a continuation of a series of episodes that we've had. So we first started talking about the ego energy. We then went into the child
The
ego
child?
state. The child ego state. We talked about the parent ego state, and now we will be talking about the adult ego state. So when we start about the adult, what do we talk about?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it is the last of the major three ego states, and we'll be talking a lot about them as the episodes go on. Now that we're actually going to use the language, because you and I all have been worked really hard as to try not to use the language until we've explained what each one is. So today we're going to explain the last one. So, let's look at the professionals. Let's see what the professionals say about what the adult ego state is. So I've got a couple of definitions. You've got a definition there too. So my one here is from a couple of brilliant guys called Van Joins and Ian Stewart. They wrote loads of books, the most famous being TA Today, and this one here is called Personality Adaptations. Really, really interesting book. So the adult ego state, it says, in the adult ego state, the person is thinking, feeling, and behaving as his age-appropriate self. Adult functioning is based on the here and now observations and estimates of probabilities. We'll talk a bit about that in a moment. So when we're in adult,
Uh-huh.
the person is neither replaying his own childhood nor being one of his parent figures. So they kind of talk about it from a process of elimination. So when you're
Mm.
in your adult, you're not in your child ego state and you're not in your parent ego state, which means, conversely, if you're in your parent ego state, you're not in your adult. And if you're in your child ego state, you're not in your adult. So that's one of the definitions. But you've got a lovely one there too, don't you, Charlie?
Yes, it's actually by the
Ah,
man himself,
Mr. Byrne.
Mr. Byrne. And I love this phrase. It's this is your adult means you have just made an autonomous, objective appraisal of the situation in a non-prejudicial manner. It's part of the quote. There's a
Yeah.
big chunk in the middle, but that stood out to me, and it kind of resonates very well with the quote that you had.
Yeah, yeah. So, especially, when you and I were thinking about this, Ollie, the non-prejudicial part is very important. So non-judgmental, right? So when you're
Hmm.
in your adult ego state, you're non-judgmental. Um, but conversely, again, when you're in your child or your parent, you are judging in some way, usually just trying to figure something out and using kind of the past to do that
Yeah.
rather than the present and looking at it from a kind of a fully rounded experience. And that's kind of what Byrne is talking about there in terms of autonomous. So, thinking for ourselves based on what's going on right here and now in front of us. When we get into this, you'll see actually we do a lot of this every single day. We do a lot of adult thinking. We probably just didn't realize it's adult thinking. And we'll move into the different areas of life where we do that. We actually do a lot of it every single day. We're just going to be naming it today as adult.
And that's beautiful. I mean, what I wanted to say there is the great thing about it, and we talked about it in the prep to this episode, is that you can showcase the adult at any age. And what you said in the definition you had is age appropriate. And that could be at 5 years old, could be at 12 years old, could be at 37 years old, could be at 55 years old. But it depends on the age appropriate thing. And that's great that you can be an adult in TA terms any age.
Yeah, absolutely. So when I'm talking about it, um, often the circles we draw for the ego states. You have a round circle for parent, a round circle for child. But with the adult, I draw it as a continuous circle that's going around and around and growing throughout life.
Mhm.
Because that's effectively what's happening with the adult ego state. We've got it there from the very beginning. And what that means is it's our ability to learn. Now, of course, a 1 year old doesn't know as much as a 10-year old, but it's still
True.
able to learn, right? So, and it's feeding into the adult based on observations, based on putting things together ourselves. So, absolutely, like a 5-year-old has a growing adult ego state, and they can say stuff that's really spot on.
Mm.
That's non-judgmental, that's balanced, that sometimes they even call things out,
Right.
certain behavior,
Yeah.
that's not very kind what you did there. It's like, boom, they're right. So, and of course, as it grows, it gets bigger because we got more information that we're taking in. Because sometimes people talk about the adult ego state. It's a bit like a computer. It's like
Okay.
with taking in a lot of data and weighing it up and balancing it. And also, a computer doesn't get upset when it learns something new, right? So
Mm.
neither does the adult ego state. It just takes in that information, where once it used to think one thing, now it can think another based on real experience, which it can then check, reality check. That's the beauty about it.
Wow.
What do you think of that?
And I mean, the phrase that sums it up for me really is the fact that the adult is the ability to learn.
Yeah,
And that's we've seen even or when you mentioned to call things out, I think that was really powerful. And I remembered, for example, when as a parent, my son would call me out sometimes. Oh, well, you did something that you told me I shouldn't be doing. And I was like,
yeah,
okay, interesting. Why did that happen?
yeah. Interesting and correct.
Interesting and correct. And I think he was coming from the adult,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, absolutely. Accessing the adult, his adult ego state by saying, "This is what I learned from you, and you're not acting in a way that you said that this is the way to act." So, but it's doing it. The lovely part about, I mean, because the child ego state is learning as well, but the adult does it in a very balanced, non-judgmental way.
Mm,
Do you know what I mean? Like in that example, Ollie, your son might not be holding it against you.
sure.
It may have just been calling it out, or he may have just been calling it out. Do you know what I mean? And
And
that's what when we know it's adult.
and I feel it came out from it comes out a lot of the time, especially with children, from a place of curiosity. Okay, so wait, you said this, but you're doing this, and that kind of doesn't sound what you were talking to me about. So, and I do feel it doesn't feel judgmental, just like a genuinely curious calling out question. It's like, really tell me what's happening there.
I love it. I love it. There's a phrase. I don't know if there's a Ukrainian equivalent, but it's out of the mouth of babes. So children can say stuff that's just so accurate because they're not filtering it sometimes. Do you know what I mean? They're just saying it, say what you see type thing, and it can be so spot on.
Yes.
And of course, if as parents or adults ourselves, if we're open to listening, then we're updating our adult. It's like, yes,
Mm,
actually, you're correct. That's I probably wasn't. Or I might have been judgmental in what I said, or I might have said it in a tone, or I might have,
true.
do you know what I mean? There might be a whole lot of stuff that indicates I wasn't in my adult ego state. So
Yeah,
it's,
we
it's a
do.
continuous process, right?
There is a phrase like that. I think it's if it translated word for word, it's through the mouths of the children, the truth is being said.
Oh,
You know, so
yes.
something. So it's a more formal, but still it kind of has the same meaning. And but one thing I wanted to move towards is, and when you mentioned it in our prep, I really felt interested about it, is about adult ego strengthening.
Yeah, it's a huge amount of what I do in my practice day to day, both as a psychotherapist and a coach. Yeah,
Right.
and without a doubt, there's a lot of managers do it too. So our adult ego state is growing all the time, which means we
Hmm.
we can feed it, right? But also it can become confusing as to when people are in their adult ego state. They might believe they're in their adult ego state, but they're not, based on how they're saying something, or when you slow them down and get them to think and reflect about how they came to a conclusion or came to an idea.
Mm.
So when I'm a therapist, when I'm or a coach, and I'm getting people to examine their thoughts, I'm helping them differentiate their adult from their parent and child. And
Oh,
and therefore, when they hear the difference and when they get a sense of the difference, they can then strengthen their adult ego state. So when they get to a place where they're thinking non-judgmentally, when they're just dealing, say, with the facts, and they're thinking through, for example, what they want to achieve by a
hmm.
particular action, or by a particular by saying something to somebody, then they're getting in more and more into their adult ego state. And if they go and do something from that adult ego state. They've strengthened it through their
Mm.
awareness, through their practice. So you probably see it as a coach, right, Ali? In terms of where you're strengthening somebody's adult ego state.
Oh, definitely. I mean, I would never call it, well, I hadn't called it
Mm,
a ego strengthening or strengthening the adult ego state. Yes, for sure. But I think it's um, the adult ego state is a great ego state to show up at work, specifically for the attributes you already mentioned that it does. It's problem solving, it's teamwork, it's working together, kind of making everyone work together. I believe in the preparation that we had to this episode, when we were brainstorming, the word that came to mind was glue for me.
mm, mm.
And it was kind of a glue that combined all the other ego states because all the other ego states are useful at work. You have to be
Oh yeah,
creative, you have to be structured, you have to be all of those ego states. But the adult ego states can get them all together in a room and make all of that work. And
absolutely.
that's it's basically the glue and the balance between all the ego states, and especially if there's multiple interactions going on with multiple people and they're very different, and some people may be
Mm,
more prone to be outgoing and vocal, and the others are not. How do you make that balanced out so that everyone's opinion is heard, everyone can contribute to this teamwork going forward together? And I think that was one of the things that came to mind when I was thinking about the adult ego state at work.
yeah,
How does that sound to you?
yeah, absolutely. Because I always find with the adult ego state, it has a particular feeling to it. You're not out to get anybody. You're genuinely curious and inviting, their thoughts, because you want to hear, you know, from them based on their experience. And that's even, we were talking about it, like even if it's a new person who's just come into the company and has joined the team, who might feel a bit nervous and anxious, as a manager, we can invite them into their adult ego state by asking their opinion.
Yeah,
Like, you've come from a different company. How do they do it there? What's worked, and based on your experience. So in TA, we'd be kind of calling that adult ego state strengthening. But really, I'm just connecting with that person in a very level, non-judgmental, open, curious way. And of course, gradually, that's going to make them feel an awful lot more confident the more they get into their adult
yeah,
state, yes, ego state, and share it, and people go, "Oh yeah, that's a great idea." Let's trial that. So it's just terminology. We do it, and it feels good. That's what I find when I'm ever when it's kind of like the adult ego state. It's like a balancer and reality checker. Which is much less emotive than the parent and the child. You know.
right, right. Wow. And the thing that you also mentioned is that you when you work with people around the adult ego strength thing is you help them find these ways or find the situations where they're not in the adult, where they're in the adult, right? How would you do that? So what would I look out for in and knowing that I'm in the adult ego state or way out of there?
Yeah. That's a brilliant question, and it is a place I love to play with, as a coach and a therapist, because genuinely some people will believe they're in their adult ego state when they're saying some stuff. So it's kind of out of their awareness. They think they are. Isn't it reasonable for me to say that? That there might be a thing, and when you slow them down and you get them to reflect back on some of the choice of words they're using, or in particular the amount of emotion that might be behind it, because it's not that the adult ego state is emotionless. There is emotion, there's thoughts and feelings in the adult ego state, but they're not kind of high level stuff that you might get in the child or the parent. So if somebody's saying something that they think might be adult, the words might sound adult, but how they're saying it, the tone and their their
Mhm.
their physical behavior, I mean, they might be more urgent and more stern and have so there's a bit of intimidation going on there. And I say, if I'm sitting on the other side and said, well, actually, if you were saying that to me, I can hear the words, but I can see you're you're trying to force something on me here. You know, can you see that yourself? And when they start to see it, they start to realize, oh yeah, I suppose, yeah, what that was a bit. I probably could have chosen different words, or I was actually just trying to get my point across. It sounded like a question, but I was actually just trying to get my point across. So then, so they start to hear the difference. And again, when I'm working that way, I'm working from often the adult ego state, or child, that I'm trying to get them to have a bit of fun with it,
Mm.
not to persecute themselves, not to judge. Oh God, I'm an idiot for doing that. No, 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 no. That's not adult. So you
And
know,
not okay.
no,
And not
not
okay.
okay, exactly. But by slowing down and playing with it, they can start to hear and feel the difference and choose different words. And before they go into that conversation or go into that meeting, how kind of relaxed are they? If they're very tense and nervous and urgent, you know, chances are that's not coming from their adult ego state. That's coming from their child. So it's a process of elimination. You slow it down.
What I am hearing you say is a few very interesting things, and one is that sometimes we think that we're an adult, and we're definitely not, and that we could be saying the things that an adult will be saying, but they have a different connotation to it, even the way we say the tone of voice or the way we position it to the other person. And that's very, very interesting in how we interact with other people. And sometimes it just gives off a different, completely different vibe with that.
Absolutely. And what we're going to do in kind of future episodes, I'm sure, Ali, is looking at the communication a bit more.
Hmm.
Because when we're in our adult ego state, we're targeting the other person's adult because we're there to work together. As you were saying, we're there to problem solve. We're there to figure out something. And I know some stuff, and you know some stuff. So how do we get that out on the table so we can work on it?
Right,
So it's a very it's one of the, I think, the safest places for us to go when we're working on something or trying to connect with somebody
right,
on a level way. Because um, what we were saying there is, because the adult is non-judgmental, it's not afraid of disagreement or conflict, right? The way a child or a parent might be. I mean,
right,
the child might be afraid of conflict or disagreement. The parent might be trying to win the argument. Whereas as the adult is saying, I've got my take on this, and this is what I understand, da da da, and I want to hear yours, and it might be different,
and that's okay.
and that's okay. Yeah,
And what I'm also hearing is that the emotion in the adult is more manageable
very much so, very much so,
rather
much
than
much calmer.
within the parents and the child. The emotion kind of overwhelms at some sort sometimes, or can, at least.
Yeah, and we were looking at like in the previous episodes, we were looking at some movies to see how this
Yes.
kind of pans out. Who's really good at this in the movies? And one of the ones that came up for me straight away was Henry Ford in 12 Angry Men. I don't know
Henry
if
Fonda.
sorry, Henry Fonda. Yeah, sorry, I wrote down Henry Ford to say Henry Fonda. Thank you. I don't think Henry Fonda made cars. Maybe he did.
And I don't think Henry Ford was in 12 Angry Men,
And I don't think he was a very good
It
actor, Henry
goes
Ford.
both ways.
Oh, maybe he was actually. But yeah, I haven't seen that film in a very long time. I'm talking about decades now.
Hmm.
But what stood out to me was how kind of calm he was in his role as part of the jury, whereas 11 of them were going to convict. He slowed the process down and he thought about it very much from an adult ego state and started to look at the evidence and started to take away prejudice and started to take away, uh, emotions. And by the end of it, obviously, all of them had come round, not to his way, but to the evidence, you know. And I thought, wow, wait, that's a very, and he stayed very, very calm, especially when other people in the room weren't being calm and were trying to intimidate him. He just stuck with the evidence, stuck with the thought process, stuck with the analysis, and it made a big difference. I thought he was a very good example. What about yourself?
That was a great example. And the moment you mentioned 12 Angry Men, I was like, oh yeah, that was a great example of a person just putting everything together. And if I go back to the definition I had with the adult ego state being the glue and kind of balancing out everyone else, that's what it
Mm,
felt like that guy did. I think his character's name was Davis, right? So Davis did in the 12 Angry Men. That's what he was doing. The first thing, and I have to be very honest, finding an adult in movies was very difficult for me.
mm,
It was I always even the examples that I came up with, they either were a parent masquerading as an adult, or someone like that. But I think one of the examples was Matt Damon in the movie The Martian. So
mm.
when he was basically stuck on Mars and he had to figure out, okay, so how do I do the best of a very wild situation? And in the end, he used reason. He used how am I going to make the best out of this, and survived, which
Yeah,
was the
I
idea of
thought
the
that was a
movie.
brilliant one. Um, because most of the movie is just him, right?
Yes.
Trying to figure out stuff, especially when it goes wrong. And actually, if I remember, there was a scene where he loses all his crop. Do you remember that? Like it gets blown out, all his potatoes.
Yeah.
And he lashes out. He gets really, really angry, you know, which is not adult. But then after he gets it out, then he sits down and starts to problem solve again. You know, because he knows he has to. And the shift is amazing between the ego states. You can see it right there on the screen. But most of that film is him just trying to figure out um, in a very calm way, right? Very rational
Yeah.
way, using his experience and his training.
That it's great when the moment you said that, I thought, oh, it'd be so great sometimes to see the world through your eyes, and it's like, oh, okay, that's the ego state that goes from there. It's just try, like a minority report kind of, oh, that's the parent ego state going into the adult, went and the child went right back there. Oh, and he's okay, and I'm okay, and everything like that. But any other movies come to mind for you?
It's interesting because again, when I was thinking about it, uh, Atticus Finch, who was another lawyer, uh, well, actually, Henry Fonda wasn't a lawyer, but it was another law-orientated movie in
Right.
To Kill a Mockingbird, another fantastic movie. And again, he stays very, very calm in the face of a lot of adversity, a lot of intimidation in that movie, and because you know he wanted to make sure that the person on trial, regardless of the color of their skin, gets a fair trial, and we look at the
Mm,
evidence, you know.
hmm
Um, and even at the end, when things don't go his way, you can see the respect that he's given in the courtroom for putting forward the best case. And
mm.
there's a real sense that you know he should have won the case. And in general, I think the law tries to be as adult ego state as possible in
Okay.
general. That's I was just reflecting on that. It's trying to look
Interesting.
at things, look at facts in a balanced way, as well as kind of making, if you will, rules
Mm.
to kind of live by. Now, that's not to say that the law doesn't get it wrong a huge amount of times, right? But I think it's an effort to try and problem. Okay, if somebody's done something not right, how do we work with this? You know, what I mean, so that we can all abide by it. So it's trying to be adult in its ethos, and I think a lot of what goes on in courtrooms is trying to do that as well. Often not successfully, but I think
Right.
there's something behind it, right?
Right, and it does sound like there's something, but the two movies that I had in mind, and this one just popped up,
Oh, cool.
was you were talking about the kind of the movies that came up were law oriented, right?
Yeah.
So they had something to do with law. The movies that I had in mind are survival oriented. So Matt
Oh,
Damon, and there was another one, I can't remember the name, but there was another one with Tom Hanks where he was surviving by himself on an island with
Castaway.
Castaway with Wilson as the as I mean, I think there was a huge mix of different ego states in there, but but he had to survive, and in order to survive, he had to kind of make very rational decisions going on there.
I think again another super example. Absolutely. And again, you can watch that movie and see him track through his ego states.
Yes.
You know, so when he gets into the adult, you can see you can actually see great acting. You kind of see his mind working. He's trying to put things together and then he's working it out. But then at times, particularly at Wilson, he's in his parent ego state. He's roaring and shouting at Wilson and giving out to him, right? And then when he loses Wilson, he's all upset. And he goes into his child ego state. He's like, Wilson. So that's him tracking through. But for the, you know, he gets himself out of there because of
Wow.
his adult ego state, because of his training, because of his staying calm. problem solving.
So, a few takeaways from today's episode. If you're an actor, look into TA because that will help you act even better. Today we talked about the adult ego state, and I think the few things that I'm taking away, and that was and really an aha moment, is the adult is the ability to learn. So how we can learn. It's also the ability to problem solve, to teamwork. It's kind of like the glue and the balancer between all the other ego states. And what I also think was really, really powerful, it's not afraid of being in disagreement or going into conflict in a respective way from an I'm okay, you're okay position, right? Non-judgmental in most in every situation. So how do you think, Jason, we've progressed with the adult ego state so far?
I think that was a great sum up, Ollie. Absolutely. And I know now we've named all three. In future episodes, we can talk about them a bit more, and even spot them as they appear, as we did today. So I think we did a very good job.
That's great, and my dog agrees with you there. I don't know why she's barking, but dear viewers and listeners, thank you for being with us on this episode of OK Everyday, where Jason and I talked about the adult ego state. If you like this video, press the like button, share your comments in the comment section below, and if you're interested in TA content, that's great because you're in the right place. Press that subscribe button. We're also on Spotify, so you can press the subscribe button there, and we will keep you informed of any new OK Everyday episodes that are coming out in the near future. In any case, we really hope that you stay okay
Every day.
every day.